with us for Sasha Dees with us, who will be moderating the panel with our curators with us today. So if you have any questions during the time, feel free to raise your hand. We can answer it, interrupt us at any time. Thank you.
好，谢谢各位朋友今天下午来到我们这一场Nexus 加勒比海地区录像与新媒体艺术的展览。那当我们讲到加勒比海的时候，脑中会出现几个就是stereotype， 包括像是甘蔗田、糖厂、殖民农业、海滩、热带气旋。那听起来好像有点熟悉，就是跟台湾有点像。所以我们今天会讨论很多台湾跟加勒比海地区的相同之处跟相异之处。
Thank you for coming with us and coming to the event today. Today we'll talk about the Caribbeans. When it comes to the Caribbeans, what pops in your mind? Some people may think about sugarcane farms, colonials, agriculture, beaches, sunny sides, and all the Philippines. That may sound similar to Taiwan's. We are around the same regulators in Taiwan as well with Caribbean. So today we'll talk about a lot of similarities and differences between Taiwan and the Caribbean.
虽然我刚才描述了有很多的相同之处，但是实际上台湾这边跟加勒比海是相隔非常非常遥远的距离。那我们今天本来非常希望可以邀请的这个艺术家能够来到我们现场来跟我们一起做互动，但实际上呢，因为这个飞行距离过于遥远，再加上其他各式各样的问题，包括签证的一个问题等等的，所以呢，很可惜这些艺术家没有办法到现场跟我们一起讨论今天的作品。
Although we mentioned some of the similarities between Taiwan and the Caribbeans, if we are physically very far away, ideally we would love to have some of these participating artists to be with us present here as well. But there are several challenges they have overcome, for example, visa issues or physical distance issues. So unfortunately, we are not able to have them here with us today.
那这个问题呢，可能不只是交通距离上的一个问题。那我们有试着想说，是不是可以用这个网络连线的方式，让艺术家们可以参与？那后来发现时差的一个关系现在加勒比海地区可能是早上3点到4点左右，所以后来决定就是说，因为这个时差真的差异太大了，那对艺术家来讲真的太辛苦了，所以我们就决定只有我跟Sasha来做这一场座谈。那从这些小地方，其实我们就可以看到，这两个地方要交流，其实它心态上有它非常辛苦的地方。
Well, originally we also hope that they can participate even though they're not physically here. We were thinking about maybe talk to them online, remotely. However, there are also time differences issues. Now it's around 3 or 4 in the morning in the Caribbean region. So these are some of the points that inhibit or prohibits a lot of exchanges happening between Taiwan and the Caribbean.
那实际上呢，加勒比海内部彼此之间要交流，其实也是重重的阻碍，因为它是由很多的一个岛屿所构成的一个区域。那这些岛屿有的是独立的国家，有的至今依旧是这一个就是欧洲国家的一个属地，或是美国的属地。那在这些岛屿地区呢，它使用着很多种不同的语言。那岛屿跟岛屿之间的交通其实没有大家想象的这么容易。那这个部分也许等一下我们会讨论到。
Even within the Caribbean regions, there are a lot of challenges for them to interact with each other because they have different kind of sovereignty status. Some of them are independent, some of them are still overseas territory of European countries, some of them belong to America, and they're also using different languages. Even within the Caribbean regions, the transportation can be a challenge between different islands. So even though they are all belong to the quote-unquote the Caribbean, there are a lot of challenges they have to overcome in order to have the interaction together.
所以，也许在这场座谈，最开始的时候，我会想邀请Sasha这边来，为我们介绍一下，就是说，就是这整个展览的一开始的一个趣旨，就是包括为什么想要筹办这一场展览，然后这一档展览的主要的想要讨论的内容， 跟为什么用 Nexus 这个标题。
So maybe we can start by inviting Sasha to talk about what is the starting point and motivation about this exhibition, and what is the preparation process, and why do you have the title Nexus?
Hello? Sorry. It came really out of my research that I did for 2 years in the Caribbean between 2017 and 2019, where I traveled to 16 different countries in the Caribbean, and I mapped out the infrastructure available for the arts. This turned out into a publication that I wrote in COVID times, which was of course a perfect project because I'm sitting by myself in my house. But it's actually also available to you if you see the video where I'm talking. There's a QR code next to it that you can download the publication if you would be interested in knowing more about Caribbean more than what we talk about now today. So I published a book, and I think about 10 years ago I met a Taiwanese that was in New York for the Ministry of Culture, C.B. Yang, who is currently the Deputy Director of the theater in Taichung. And so she knew that I had published this publication, and she introduced this to Director Lowe of this museum, who actually had talked with her about that if COVID was ending, she would like to present another international show. And so they asked me if it was possible to make a proposal. I had 3 weeks time to do it, and so I did. And then I thought it would be most interesting to actually find words. It had to be video words, to find words that somehow were related to Taiwan. And I didn't know that much about Taiwan actually myself, so I tried to do as much research that I could online and reading books, and then find the words that somehow, translation.
好，这一切的起源其实是我当时长年以来在加勒比海进行的研究，包括在从2017年到19年的这2年时间，我住在加勒比海，总共前后造访了当地16个国家跟地区。那后来呢，在疫情期间的时候，就把它写成了一本书出版，在用英文的方式出版，在对外出版。然后这本书呢，如果各位有兴趣的话呢，其实可以用英文的免费电子书的下载，在后面的 QR code 上面。So if you're interested, QR code is behind there. So if you want to download it, it's for free. 所以有免费英文的电子就可以下载，大家可以下载一下。那下载之后呢，在出版之后呢，那后来我在住在纽约的时候，有一天遇到了现在在台中国家歌剧院的副总监燕基平副总监，他当时就因为他的介绍之后，因此认识了台北当代馆的这个馆长陆一真馆长。大家就讨论说，如果疫情之后有机会可以再办这个国际性展览的话，希望能够邀请我办展览。那当时我有3个礼拜的时间去做提案。我希望我们当时要设立主题就是新印象艺术跟新媒体艺术，所以我们当时希望可以找到跟台湾有关系或关联性的一些作品。所以当时我在台湾认识也不多，所以我就透过网络还有各种书籍的方式，尽速研究出那3个礼拜提出展览提案。
So apart from wanting to link them to Taiwan, it was a little challenging question because video art and digital media is not a medium that is used very frequently on the islands in the Caribbean. Some of them are very small, like St. Martin, for instance, only 34 square kilometers, and it has 30,000 people.
另外一点，我们要筹备这个展览的困难之处是在于，我们今天主要作品都是录像艺术或新媒体艺术这样的媒材跟媒介，在加勒比海的艺术家之间并不是太常见，因为相对有些困难点存在。有些地方国家很小，比如说等一下有可能提到的圣马丁这个地方，总共面积只有34平方公里，它的人口也只有3万人。
So it means already a little bit talking also about mobility for equipment and for software, etc. It's very hard to get that on small islands because there are not a lot of people interested in it. You have to import it, it's expensive. If it breaks down, you have to send it away. There's also nobody that can actually teach you how to use it, or you can be in conversation with on your island. So you need to. It's a difficult practice to have. So I'm always amazed if people actually do it, and all these people in the show actually overcome all these challenges to make these kind of works.
另外一点是，他们的国家比较小的时候，这些软硬体要进口就已经相当不方便了。另外一方面，在当地的话，设备可能也不足，或者是器材不足的情况之下，如果这些设备进口之后损坏了，他们要送到国外去修，或者是因为人口比较少的关系，对于这样类型的媒介的有兴趣的人口或者是艺术家，可能有相对更少，所以他们要去讨论跟交流的时候，在国内可能也难进行。所以我这次有机会能够呈现出这几届的录像跟新媒体艺术作品是非常难得的。有这样的艺术家，他们克服了国外的种种困难之后，创作出来这些作品。
So what I also wanted to do was present a broad spectrum. So I looked into there's 2 emerging artists, younger artists, 2 mid-career artists, and 2 established artists. All of the artists actually are shown internationally, including the emerging ones. And certainly the more established ones have shown their work on all the big manifestations worldwide, like Venice Biennale and Documenta. So they are very well-known artists.
这次我们选择的艺术家，其实他们的跨度也比较广泛。这次总共有2位是比较新任的艺术家，2位发展时间也过了一段创作生涯有一段时间的艺术家，还有2位更资深的艺术家。那这6组艺术家，其实他们都在国际间有很多展出经验，比如说在这些卡塞尔国建展啊，或者是威尼斯双年展，都可以见到他们的作品。
I also tried to show works from islands that are very different economically, as well as with different colonial history and different language areas. So within 6 artists, I tried to be as diverse as possible, so you could have a big range to see.
我们也希望这6组艺术家可以呈现出它的多元性的样貌，所以在这里面，他们所来自的国家或地区，他们的经济发展规模跟程度不一样，他们所面对的情况不一样，语言跟语系也不一样，所以希望能够在这样6组艺术家当中呈现最多的多样性。
So as Nobuo was already explaining, I focused after the research on transnational labor, LGBTQ issue, sovereignty, immigration, and issues that I thought also had some links to what is happening in Taiwan, although different, but still it would be an entrance point and a way for Taiwanese audiences to recognize something that then would draw you into the work to learn more about the Caribbean.
当然，加勒比海跟台湾之间有很大的差异性，无论是环境背景、脉络因素等等。但是我还是希望能够从这些作品当中找到跟台湾之间的连结之处或者是关联之处。所以，比如说这次作品里面关注的主题，包括了跨国劳工问题、移民问题、LGBTQ 的这些族群的问题。我相信，虽然背景情况不同，但是还是让台湾观众能够找到共鸣跟能够关注的地方。
Does that answer enough?
So we continue. 可以帮忙调到地图面。对，我们给大家看一下加勒比海的地图，也许大家会比较物理上有感觉那个加勒比海的状态。
So this is the Caribbean map, so you can better understand the ideas about the area that we're talking today.
那Sasha 他刚才介绍到，就是他挑选艺术家的一个方法，就是有刻意去维持那个多样性。那我就顺着他的这个脉络呢，就是继续来讨论一下，就是说这一次不同艺术家之间的一个差别。
So Sasha mentioned about the diversity he wanted to create within the 6 teams of artists. So based on this idea to talk about the artists, individual artists that we are showing today.
那我们刚才有一直在提到，就是说每个岛屿他们的整个政治、经济、文化都非常不同。那我也在想说，这样子的不同会不会反映到这个艺术作品的一个表现上？那譬如说像是这个来自海地的 Maksaens Denis， 那就可以看到 他的作品就是非常深的跟海地的巫毒教传统，还有他们比较这一个就是混乱的一个政治现实呢是绑在一起的。
As Sasha had mentioned before, all these countries have very different situation and conditions, politically, culturally, economically. I wonder how that would influence their artistic expressions. For example, in Maksaens' works from Haiti, we can see that he focused also on the political instabilities and disturbance or economic chaos that you see in Haiti and the situation there.
那像是那个Nadia Huggins 是来自台湾邦交国 St. Kitts， 那他的作品就有蛮多这种岛屿生活的记忆、乡愁跟诗意。那Natalia 跟 Sophia 的这个作品，他们是来自 Puerto Rico。那Puerto Rico 就是一直很困惑自己到底是美国还是不属于美国，就是它是一个很奇怪的一个 in between 的一个状态。那最后这个Sharelly Emanuelson， 他是来自 Saint Martin， 就是刚才提到那个非常非常小的，甚至它是半个岛屿的国家这样子。我也经常在想说，这么小的一个地区，因为我自己去过那里，我会说这么小的一个地区到底，它所产生的这个创作的一个动力到底是什么？
So in this exhibition, we also see artists, for example, Nadia Huggins. The first work that you see, you focus on the memories and nostalgia regarding to the oceans and the island that she lives in. We also see another work from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is always ambiguous regarding to the sovereignty. Is it a part of America? Is it fully part of America? What kind of sovereignty they have? And also we see the artwork from Saint Martin. As Sasha mentioned before, Saint Martin is such a small country. They only occupy half of an island. So I was there in the past. So I would always wonder that within such a small island territory, what motivates her to start to create?
What I think in the motivation, I thought if you talk about economics, it was most clear in Haiti, for instance, because of course the economic situation there is really bad. The GDP is only $1,800 a year, and so it's very difficult to make art because people are basically trying to earn some money to even eat. But still, what I noticed when I was there, I spent about 2 months in Haiti. Certainly there is a big art scene, and if you talk to them and you would give a choice like, okay, today you can eat rice and some sauce, or you can eat rice and buy a pencil, they will choose the latter, because with the pencil they can make an artwork on a cardboard that they find, and it's their way, their language to talk about the situation in Haiti and actually have conversations with each other and with the people that will see the art. So I thought that was interesting, and also sort of reassuring for me that art in whatever situation, although we view it sometimes very elitist, in a situation like that, it is still a very important language, important in talking about your political situation. So that really struck me. And as in St. Martin, it is difficult. I think when I was talking with artists, it's a lot of younger people, and then they have to go abroad to actually get an education in art, and of course there is much more possibilities if they then, for instance, would stay in America or in Europe. So it's interesting to see that people still really try. So the smaller the island, the more it becomes you're a resident of your island, and you spend maybe half your time there, and half your time you're trying to get commissions from the international art scene, go to residencies, make connections in that way, and try to be funded also in that way by other countries that have just more financial means to actually for you to also make the art.
经济当然是在这些岛屿上的艺术家创作的时候一项很大的阻力。那比如说以海地的情况而言，海地的情况一直在政治跟经济上面是否相当不稳定、相当动荡的情况之下，当地很多民众要连求温饱都很困难，对，用这种方式创作。我曾经在海地待了2个月的时间，当时我就是询问这些在当地的年轻艺术家，他们虽然过得很困苦，但他们还是运用各种可以用到的资源来做创作，比如说吃饭之后剩下这个纸盒，就在纸盒上面创作等等，然后让大家有更多机会，透过不同的方式能够接触到这些艺术。虽然说我们一般现在提到艺术的时候，你会觉得是一个非常精英的东西，非常精英的人才会做的事情。但是我觉得在那个地方深受震撼是，即便在这么艰困的经济处境之下，这些艺术家还是持续坚定的创作，对他来说这是非常重要的表达的语汇跟创作的途径跟方式。那在圣马丁的话，当然当地的人口很少，然后资源也相当少，所以很多的艺术家们想要接受教育，甚至艺术教育都要前往其他国家能够接受教育，也是之后就因此留在了美国欧洲等等，因为当地比较多的机会。那另外一方面，很多的这些艺术家后来就变得好像自己的人生生活当中有半数的时间待在这些岛屿上，半数时间可能比如说参加驻村活动或者是接受国际性的艺术单位的委托制作等等，然后通过不同的活动、不同的交流，进而有更多获得赞助、获得经费的机会跟他创作的可能性。
So in the case of St. Martin, you actually in an exhibition showed the work of Deborah Jack, who's really at the moment the most known artist from St. Martin, but she lives in the States. She teaches there, and that's basically how she can make her work, because again, it's video work, so that's very challenging. But all her work is about St. Martin, so she takes also the time in between teaching and all the vacations and all her sabbaticals to actually go back to St. Martin and actually make the work there.
比如说之前高登老师所策划展览里面有呈现出是圣玛丽艺术家他的作品，那个这个作品，他其实现在这位艺术家就在美国教书，那从事教职，因此他有机会可以有更多的创作的空间。他也做的也是录像跟新媒体艺术，但同时间他的作品都跟圣马丁有关系，所以即使他自己现在居住在美国，但他还是会通过不同的机会、不同的可能性之后，回到圣马丁继续关注跟关照圣马丁的情况。
Another way that artists do, specifically the ones that I'm showing, Christopher Cozier and Sharelly Emanuelson on Curacao, they both definitely wanted to be on their island. So they also started project spaces in art collectives and residencies where they purposefully also invite other people from outside to the islands in order to actually have that critical conversation about work and feedback and trying also on the island to get people who are acquainted with what contemporary art is, although there is not that much. Do all these projects with their communities, in that sense sort of taking their audiences by the hand with the 1 or 2 or 3 artists that are there to actually engage them in the practices of experimental and contemporary art.
那另外一方面，我这次展览的这些艺术家，包括了这个 Emanuelson 或者 Christopher Cozier， 他们很坚持就要留在自己的岛上面。那另外一方面，他们也透过不同的方式能够跟世界互动，例如说成立艺术团体，或者说成立驻村计划等等，邀请其他地方的艺术家到岛上来国家里面来跟他们做更多的互动。另外一方面，他们在这些有限资源的情况之下，也举办了各种公开的活动、公众的活动，希望让更多当地的民众可以去了解他们的实践方式，然后从事参与各种不同的可能性的实验。
So that also works in terms of the space and group that Christopher Cozier has, for instance, called Alice Yard. And as the Alice Yard organization, they were also part of Documenta, the last Documenta. It also works, he goes somewhere, invites other people back on the island. It's also how I met him in New York. he knew that if I would travel to Suriname, I would have to stop in Trinidad, so he invited me to get out and spend 2 weeks. I would then meet people, which in that case resulted in me inviting 2 very emerging young artists from Trinidad to a residency that I had at the time in the Netherlands. And then planned it during the summertime, so we could set up for them to also go to the Venice Biennale, go to Berlin, so they actually get exposure to what is happening outside of their own networks.
那有另外一位艺术家来自千里达多巴哥，千里达多巴哥在这个委内瑞拉的上面的小小的地方。那千里达多巴哥这个地方，这里。Christopher Cozier 也是来自这个地方，他其实也是我在他也成立了艺术团体叫做 LCR 因此也参与了去年刚举办完的这个卡塞尔文件展。那我也是因为这样的关系之后，在纽约认识他。他透过这些不同的机会之后，把大家带到千里达去认识这个地方。他知道我要去苏利南，就是底下就是下面另外国家是一定要取到千里达，他要经过千里达，他就邀请他在千里达留了2年半的时间，认识了更多当地年轻7月的艺术家之后，比如说通过驻村的机会，把他们带到荷兰去。那通过到荷兰之后，有机会让他们去了，比如说威尼斯双年展，或者去了柏林等等，让这些当地原本在国内的艺术家也有机会能够知道外面的艺术圈子在发生什么事。
So this, I think, proves the need and also the success of using that kind of model. And Sharelly is an emerging artist herself, but she really has looked at what Chris has done in Trinidad with Lassalle, which Lassalle is actually a collective of its 3 founders. And you know, like certainly with him, you see that like it has gained the interest of, for instance, MoMA curators thinking, oh, maybe we should actually travel to the Caribbean, and then they actually start acquiring works. His work is in the MoMA, other people's work are starting to enter in like these more very mainstream known locations.
透过这些不同的互动之后，比如说刚才提到 Christopher Cozier 他所成立的这个 LCR 就是3位创办人一起成立的团体，透过这些不同展出机会之后，让各国的策展人也开始对于加勒比海感到好奇，然后进而可能进到美术馆去购藏他的作品，比如他们现在的作品也在纽约的 MoMA 里面有购藏等等，所以这些都是让他们的作品让更多人或者更多不同地区的观众看到的机会。
So to me, this is one of the reasons why the exhibition is called Nexus. I think it's very much about connections, and their practice is sort of the proof of that also. And I thought, you know, the invitation by MoCA, I was really happy with it because, you know, it is another way to connect to a country and a region that for them is maybe not that reachable. And I'm hoping that out of it maybe some spin-off comes out of it, that people are interested and maybe they apply for residencies in the region, or they are interested in inviting somebody, which actually I'm hosted by the Treasure Hill Arts Village. I stayed for 3 months. I've been here a month now. And the director of it came to the opening of the exhibition, saw the work for Rodell Warner, and she has an open call for work like this, so she likes to include him. So that's the way that I hope to make the connections in one Nexus.
这次呢，之所以叫做 Nexus 的原因，是因为 Nexus 也有连结的意思。我希望通过这样的展出之后，能够创造出更多的连结，也许会有一些意外的收获，会有更多意想不到的可能性等等。比如说，我这次在台湾总会待3个月的时间，我已经待了1个月，都住在这个宝藏岩国际艺术村。那我们前几天开幕晚会的时候，艺术村的这个总监还有来到现场，然后看了这个作品之后，他就注意到，比如说其中有些作品非常符合他们的征件或者征件这个计划跟目标，所以希望能够把这位艺术家之后有机会带到这个征件计划当中来。所以我觉得这就是一个新的可能性，让大家知道有不同的连接的机会。
So maybe artists or future artists in the room just be aware that it's going to be a long travel and take some time to get over the 12-hour jet lag.
所以当然的话，对于这些艺术家呢也要有心理准备，因为毕竟时间时差这么多，时间间隔这么多，然后非正常的时间到这边，前面一开始呢也会有一段时差要调试的过程。
But I promise you it will be worth your while to go there.
无论是来台湾或者是去加勒比海，虽然过程会很辛苦，但是绝对很值得。
好，谢谢你跟Sasha的一个介绍。那我这边想要再多补充一下我自己的一个经验，因为像刚才Sasha提到那个海地的一个经济状况非常的严峻。那我自己以前去海地的时候，最大的震撼是，即便经济状况真的不是这么的好，但是我第一次看到有国家就是路上的小贩，就是因为很多开发中国家都会有小贩在街上就是兜售物品，然后他是贩卖绘画，对，那我觉得这件事情非常的有趣，而且我后来发现海地人经常会把绘画当作是一个礼物来去送礼给别人。
I want to share some of my personal experience as well. Sasha previously mentioned about Haiti. Haiti is here, out of the Dominican Republic here. Haiti is indeed economically very unstable, and there are a lot of chaos in the countries. But when I went there, I saw that there are a lot of street vendors on the streets. It's very common in developing countries that there are street vendors on the street, but some of them are selling paintings. It was very fascinating to me. Even in those conditions, they still sell paintings, and many people in Haiti actually give people paintings as a gift. So that's a cultural customs in them. So that's even in their situations, I think it's still very surprising to me.
对，那当然就是我们刚才讨论到经济，那经济确实在加勒比海地区扮演一个非常重要的一个影响的一个因素。那通常观光产业会把加勒比海描述成一个就是很有异国风情的度假天堂，但实际上加勒比海如果我们回到18、19世纪的话，当时的岛屿可能是驱动全球的一个经济中心。那当然那时候的经济是行业。那我觉得这个部分其实跟现在的台湾对比是很有趣的，因为台湾在这个当下好像也是某一种半导体产业的一个全球经济中心。
Economy is indeed an important driver or factor in the Caribbean. When the tourism industry described Caribbeans, they would imagine it as an exotic destination. But in the past, in the 18th or 19th centuries, it was actually an important economic powerhouse in the world because it exported and produced a lot of sugar. So if you compare the situation about Taiwan in some way, I think it's quite interesting because Taiwan nowadays in some way becomes like a powerhouse for economic factors around the world because of semiconductors.
那当然就是说，这样子的一个经济，它是奠定在奴隶制度之上。那这样子的一个历史也，成为加勒比海地区一个非常就是沉重的一个伤痕，一直到今天。
But of course, that the sugar industry in the past was built on slavery, and that created a lot of legacy and traumas in the Caribbean even until today.
那在当代，其实还有很多各式各样的问题，包括比如说有一些属地，因为就是它至今依旧是那个欧洲的一个属地，所以他们就有很多的这一个移民或者是脱渡的一个问题。那其他的一个地方只是在这样子的一个全球就是政治竞争，就是全球的这个地缘政治的一个情境之下，其实也有各式各样的一个大国在里面角力的一个背景。
Besides those legacy issues, there are also a lot of contemporary issues in there. There are sovereignty issues. Some of the countries I mentioned before are still overseas territories of European countries, so the sovereignty is still ambiguous. And also there are immigrations coming from different parts of us. There are also trafficking issues. There are also geopolitical factors. So different superpowers are also trying to battle in between the region.
那在岛屿内部，不论是比较富裕的国家，或是比较贫穷的国家，其实面临的问题却很相似，通常都是比如说教育资源的不足，然后青年人口的流失，那很多的就业人口他们必须要到 美国或者是去欧洲去就业。那在这样子的一个情境之下，其实它也很深刻的影响到了这个艺术圈的一个发展。
Many of these countries, although they have very different level of economic development, they face very similar issues. For example, they have very limited educational resources that's resulted in the population outflow. Many younger people have to go to other countries or America for employment or economic opportunities, and in that situation, that also impede and also influence the economic development and the development of art in the countries.
那我觉得加勒比海艺术对我来讲最有趣也是最震撼的地方，就在于说，你可以感觉到那边的艺术家有很深的一个热情，然后他们不只是想要透过他们的一个作品去反映这个地方的一个历史跟文化，同时他们也很积极的想要去解决现有资源匮乏的一个状况。那包括就是Sasha提到的这些艺术家，还有我自己过去认识的一些艺术家，其实他们很多人都很努力的在那边，比如说透过经营空间或是经营这个艺术教育的一个机构来去解决这些问题。
Through these arts from the Caribbean regions, you can actually feel their enthusiasms, and they're not just enthusiastic in art, they're also taking active actions in trying to change, improve the situation. Just like Sasha mentioned before, they may operate their own space, they may have all different activisms, they also go on, for example, do public educations, improve and understand the situations and enhance the condition there.
那我在想，这样子的一个状况也让就是加勒比海艺术变得非常的一个不一样。那我现在想说，再把这个问题丢回给Sasha，就是因为他其实已经在台湾有一阵子，虽然他每次都很谦虚的说他就是非常就是还正要开始认识这个地方，但我还是很想问，就是他就是说从他的角度观察，那他觉得台湾同样作为岛屿，那跟他过去在加勒比海研究的一个经验，那中间的异同之处到底在哪里
？I think those are the reasons partly why Caribbean artworks are different from other parts of the world. My next question to you, Sasha, is about your experience so far in Taiwan. I know you're very humble in saying that you're just here for a short time, you're just starting to learn about Taiwan, but still I'm interested in after staying a month in Taiwan and based on your experiences in the Caribbean, and Taiwan is also an island. What is the similarities and differences that you have observed between Taiwan and the Caribbean?
I think the biggest difference is kind of what you were alluding to already is, of course, the economic difference. With the semiconductors and of the past, after martial law, I think Taiwan had such a fast economic growth, so that makes it a very economically different country. I mean, the GDP of Taiwan is no different from the Netherlands. So it's also, it has a large population, so that makes a difference. It's almost 25 million people. The largest countries in the Caribbean are like about 11 million. Haiti, but that's economically challenged. Cuba, same thing, Dominican Republic. So there you see the difference of what's available to you, and that makes a very big difference. Some of the similarities.
当然，其中一项大的差异是经济发展程度的差异。就刚才高森老师提到的，其实现在当然在台湾，我们有半导体产业，还有这些多年的发展之后，我们的经济成长规模还有人均 GDP， 刚才小提到人均 GDP 在海地大概1年只有800美元，那台湾现在的数字已经跟荷兰相去无几。然后我们的人口有2500万，这样的人口数量比较多的时候，当然机会跟发展程度也会比较快速。在加勒比海人口最多的国家大概是1100万人口左右，比如说海地啊、多米尼加、古巴等等。但是这些国家的经济情况依然非常艰巨。
So, art-wise, in that sense, you can see in the bigger countries, for instance, they have much more art infrastructure, museums, and which makes sense because you have a bigger audience. And I think the similarity is both Taiwan and the countries in the Caribbean. You make an art infrastructure for the people that are there, because in the Netherlands, for instance, I can take a very affordable train to Germany and see art over there. It's obviously more challenging to take a plane to actually all of a sudden go see an exhibition in Japan. So that is kind of the same. So a lot of the artists in the Caribbean are not confronted with real works, whereas in larger islands like Taiwan, you have that available to you, and also lots of colleagues and education. I think also talking to the point of Haiti, I thought in Cuba is sort of the same thing, where art seems to be so much part of day-to-day life, like with the Havana Biennale. Everybody comes out, grandmas, children, everybody goes and interacts with the artworks, and it's not like for me in Europe, like museums are almost temples, and you have to be very quiet and to walk in them. Whereas in Cuba, I went to one of the museums in the biennial, and there was this young couple. There was an artwork from Mal Etters, who is very famous American artist. And so this couple is he uses barbed wire, and they just went into the installation, grabbed the barbed wire, made selfies, and the ushers are just, security guards are just watching and letting it happen. I mean, if you would do that in America, you would probably go to prison. So that was an interesting observation that was more to the paintings in Haiti. I'm sort of drifting away from the question, I think. The similarities,
在另外一方面的话，当然，加勒比海跟台湾这个另外一项差异是我们的基础建设程度的差异。比如是在艺术或教育上面基础建设，当然人口越多的时候，对于当地的机会越多，那基础建设也更多的机会可能性出现。对于我们的艺术这些基础建设，基本上都是为了当地民众所设计跟服务的嘛。所以人口越多的时候，这样的观众群会客群也会更加相对更多。而且在另外一方面，加勒比海跟台湾之间的相似之处是在于我们都是岛屿，所以要前往其他国家去看艺术作品的时候，相对成本比较高，没那么容易。比如说，如果你住在荷兰，你可以买一张并不贵的火车票，就可以直接搭火车到德国去看展览。你知道，在加勒比或在台湾，你要搭飞机去看日本的展览，其实相对是没这么容易，也没这么便宜。那这也是另外一个说另外的主观跟障碍。不过，就像刚才高森老师提到的，其实在海地或者是在古巴，艺术对他们来说都是日常生活中的一部分，这也是另外一项特殊之处。比如说，各位都知道，古巴的话有举办哈瓦那双年展。哈瓦那双年展期间的时候，就是观众的话，就是男女老幼都会出现在美术馆当中。对他们来说，美术馆就是生活中的一部分。如果你是在美国的话，或者在欧洲的话，常常会觉得这个美术馆是艺术的殿堂，或者一个像神庙一般的存在，进去要非常的毕恭毕敬等等。那Sasha自己就在哈瓦那双年展里看过一件美国艺术家的作品，当时这个艺术家作品是用铁丝网做成的。那一般的时候我们就会在那边看，但是呢，对年轻情侣就直接走进去那个铁丝网里面，然后就直接开始拿起手机开始自拍。那旁边警卫就是看着这一切发生，也没有说什么话。对于我们如果在台湾或者在美国的话，如果发生这种事情的话，这对情侣可能已经被捕了。所以这也是一个当地民众对于艺术之间的态度也许有所不同的地方。
So the most striking similarity is, of course, the colonial past and sovereignty problems or complications, which within that it's also different because I think the Caribbean have been colonized by sort of for a very long time by the same colonizer, and often they are still colonized. So that makes for a certain attitude, I think, in life to deal with that, a little trauma. Whereas I think in Taiwan, it kept shifting, from the Dutch people to Ming Dynasty, Qing Dynasty, Japan, different European powers came in and out. And then the thing that seems most effective to the people now is, of course, the martial law period, which you then also see reflected in the artwork and talk.
另外一件台湾跟加勒比海相似之处，很明显的就是殖民主义所造成的影响或后遗症的后果。但是当然，两地之间还是有一些区别。在加勒比海长年以来或数百年以来，他们都是由同一个国家的殖民者所统治的，所以对他们来说，他们的整个国家跟整些人民对于这些事情的看法也会有所不同，然后有一些不同的创伤。台湾相对而言就比较特殊，是因为我们有不同的殖民者在更迭，一开始有荷兰，后来有明代、清代，后来有那个日本殖民政权等等，那这些都会造成人们对于这个殖民者的想象有些差异跟区别。那另外现在近代的话，大家看到最明显的影响就是这个戒严的影响，很多作品在台湾作品也反映出了戒严时期的经历，或者是戒严之后所造成的后果。
Yes, I think all of them also, both the Caribbean and Taiwan are struggling with okay, so then who wants you to be right now as a country, as a people, and then the similarity again is also that it's not so one voice, no, because within one country, regardless of the outside influence, not everybody agrees within the country too. So there is that kind of contradiction and sort of tension within the people, like where do we want to go in the future and how do we form that? Like,
另外一点，台湾跟加勒比海差异，大家都在思考自己的未来跟身份认同。那在加勒比海，有些国家现在还是处于被殖民的状态的时候，他们要思考自己到底应该何去何从。台湾也是如此。那即便是在同一个国家里面，我们还是有不同的意见，它并不是一个国家的一个声音。所以在国内当中，还是会有不同的摩擦、不同的这个拉扯跟抗衡。这些我也认为是在台湾或者加勒比海当中所观察到另外一个相似的。
But I think that's actually a similarity where, it's already difficult enough to, as a country, even like in countries that are, their own countries for a long time, even in the Netherlands, we are polarized too. So we are like, I'm not agreeing with somebody else either. That's already very hard to sort of live with that. And then, keep the country going. Let alone in all these countries, Taiwan and the countries in the Caribbean, that have to do that, which is already difficult. And that have all the influence from the world power, right? Because of, still being colonized or imperialism or what Leonard was saying, all the influence on the islands by other world powers, I think.
不论是台湾或加勒比海，面对了世界各个强权之间的影响之下，当然在国内会有更多的摩擦、更多的裂痕存在。即便是在欧洲这些欧洲国家、这些比较历史悠久的国家，他们依然国内还是有很多不同的意见会出现，所以再加上这些国家现在那个情况之后，会让这些的意见更难找到，比如说共识或交集的地方。
Yeah, the biggest difference to me is I come here, it's a very well-organized country, it seems like, it's very much like a country in Europe or the States, and that is very different from the Caribbean.
当然，台湾相对而言，不论是治安或者社会运动方面，都比加勒比海国家在这方面相对的有秩序，或者是相对的稳健许多，这也是另外一个明显的差别。
Okay, so I continue with another questions about literatures, and shifting to market. 转回中文频道，就是我接着继续问一个问题了，因为在加勒比海其实有很深的文学传统。那其实刚才策展人也有提到说，其实录像艺术在加勒比海因为各种资源的关系，录像艺术其实是一个非常新的一种艺术形式。可是就我自己就是非常这几年对加勒比海录像的一个观察，我发现其实 他们的作品中常常会看到，比如说诗性，或者是甚至会感觉到就是艺术家想要去讨论的某一种乡愁，或是对于社会的一个观察，还蛮接近于这一个加勒比海的文学传统。所以我蛮想问，就是说策展人对这方面的一个看法是什么？
So my last question is about the literature tradition in the Caribbean. You mentioned that video art and media art is relatively more difficult for the artists there because of practical challenges and reasons. But I also noticed that in their artworks, they still reflect some kind of poetic elements inside, or when they talk about nostalgia, or they talk about the conditions they are facing, they still have this kind of element that is quite literary and also poetic. So I want to know your perspective on this and how are the long literary traditions in some ways influence the artworks of video art?
Yeah, I think in that sense it's not different than anywhere else. I think it's something artists resort to. And of course, when you research even for yourself, if you are not an educated artist, means you can go to school. I think the people that become artists, that's part of what they do, probably even from children on. They were already children that were hungry for imagination. So, you try to read the books maybe from the library or from your parents, or if they don't have it, you find them somewhere else. Philosophers, I think, a lot of them do try to make the connections, and of course for the younger artists it's easier because of the internet, so there's more available to them in that way. But I think that it's so much part of what artists are, right? I mean, it's what we do too. You don't curate a show in a vacuum, just only based on the work. You also try to, with imagination and with wonder, try to find connections with artists from different genres and disciplines altogether. So there's always the connection between literature or films. They refer a lot to films. And so, yeah, I think that is, it's no different than anywhere else in that sense. So that's really actually a good thing, I think. Yeah.
我觉得这方面的话，加勒比海跟其他地区的艺术家其实并没有太大的差异。那无论是文学或艺术等等，很多时候这些艺术家，如果他并不是透过正统艺术教育或艺术机构而出来的这些艺术家，他们可能从小就充满了各种想象力，就已经常常在比如说画各种的图样啊等等的。那这种情况之下，他们一向都对于这些想象或者这些不同的内容很感兴趣，他们可能会看家里的书，如果家里没有书的话，在图书馆看书，或者是看各种他们能够取得的资源，然后进而把它们串联连接起来之后，无论是反映或描绘现实情况，或者是描绘他们心中所想象的情况，这些都是他们这些艺术家会喜欢做的事情。所以从文学到电影到艺术等等各地的艺术家，我相信都会从这些当中去取材他们的灵感之后，把他们透过自己的表现方式传达在他们的作品当中。
You see that also in the project spaces, where it's not only visual artists that work in the project spaces. For instance, Lassalle is founded by an architect, and then Chris is the artist, and Nicholas Laughlin, who actually is a writer and is a programmer from actually by now the biggest literary festival in the region. And so because maybe they are smaller, like you try to find other people who wonder about things too, so the connection between the different disciplines is a very natural one, so of course they influence each other.
另外一方面，就是这些艺术家常常都有身兼多职，他有不同的角色身份存在。比如说，当然，你要艺术家可能也担任教职， 或者是 Nicholas Larkin 这位艺术家，他同时也是诗人，他也做文学节等等，所以他们能够不同的角色，通过不同的方式之后，把各种的媒材跟元素结合在一起之后，把它们作为创作的部分，所以这也我也觉得是在加勒比海非常常见的情况。
It's a way for them to sort of, because they love their country, and you see that in everything. And so I think even though they want to talk about issues and complexity, they also have their own dreams, and they are also poetic. They have the hope. Even in the work from Maksaens Denis, for instance, on Haiti, you see really the complexity of the demonstrations and the literal desperation of the artist himself banging his head. There is also, the dancer and his dream that, the beauty can be there too.
所以从这些作品当中，各位都可以看得出来，这些艺术家对于自己国家的喜爱跟热爱。同时，其实他们一方面反映出了这些国家所面临的复杂问题，或者是各种不同的处境，但同时之间，他们也希望在里面去呈现出他们对于国家的希望，还有自己的梦想等等。比如说，看到另外那个 Maksaens 的作品当中呢，它呈现出来，海地社会里面经济复杂的程度、抗争的问题，还有各种的，比如说当地民族宗教的这个影响。他们同时也用不同的方式去展现自己的绝望之处。作品里面就真的拿自己头去撞玻璃、撞墙等等，这种非常激烈的方式来呈现自己的绝望。但他还是希望在里面能够找到他们，比如说透过舞蹈的形式或这种不同的方式之后，去展现他们对于这个国家可能的希望跟期望。
Or the poetics of Nadia's work, for instance, where we look at St. Vincent and we just think exotic and tourism. And her work is really about the people just being themselves freely in the water, and it's very poetic in that way.
那比如说 Nadia 的作品也非常的有诗意。我们一般想到圣维森的时候，就想到它是一个充满异国风情的观光度假胜地，但他希望能够回归到人自由自在，在自然当中去过生活，在自然当中去享受他的生活，他回到人的本性的层面。我觉得这也是非常诗意的一部分。
Yeah, I am also wondering, of course, if you saw the artworks and you've worked with artists in the Caribbean, so I'm really curious about your opinion and how, as a Taiwanese curator, you have experienced the works and the show as a total.
大家有好奇，高森老师对于这次看到展览里面作品之后有什么样的感想？而且另外一方面，高森老师之前接触过不同的加勒比海的艺术家跟艺术作品，所以不知道高森老师对于这次的展出的内容有什么想法？
And then, of course, another question like how you from Taiwan see the similarities and the differences with the Caribbean. I'm really interested in that too.
那当然，从台湾的观点而言，觉得台湾跟加勒比海之间有什么样的异同呢？
Okay, so maybe I can start from my personal experience. I started knowing about the Caribbean country arts since 2014, before I traveled to Caribbean. And the first things I got is this curation in the Caribbean people group, and which describes the art historians from different countries in the Caribbean, and also the curatorial methodologies from the region. And I got I got inspired by it because I feel just by reading the art history and methodologies, I got a lot of similarity between the two countries.
那高老师在2014年的时候，透过这个阅读这个小蓝书嘛，然后就看到很多在关于各加勒比海里面的一些，比如说艺术史，还有他们的神话传说等等，我就发现其实在很多当中有一些相似之处，跟台湾之间有很多看起来可以对比的地方。
So what were the similarities most striking for you?
有什么样的相似特别吸引注意的？
I think it's about the similarities of the colonial histories and how the artists respond to this kind of history, especially the historical traumas by late artistic narrative.
我觉得其中一项很有趣的是，相应之处是关于殖民历史，还有对这些殖民的这些伤痕等等，他们如何在其中找到不同的艺术论述形式。
And also the way how the curators they make themselves very flexible to adapt the environment. For example, I'm very curious about. I remember there's a chapter to talk about in Trinidad. They try to like combine the carnivals together with the curations, and I think this kind of a spirit somehow is also very near the ideals amongst the Southeast Asia here.
另外一方面，我觉得他们当地的策展人其实也非常的弹性，他们能够去运用当地的资源，比如说把嘉年华会跟策展的经验跟策展的实践结合在一起之后去呈现出来。我觉得在这方面，在弹性这方面的时候，我觉得有很多比如说台湾或东南亚地区的这些策展人，他们也会在这个类型上面发挥他们不同的弹性。
I think the carnival is relating to what I found out here in Taiwan. When I talked with CP, and I hadn't realized that, but the National Theatre here is really the first indoor theatre that didn't really exist, that you would, as a people, go in a location, pay for a ticket, and then see performing arts, for instance. And I hadn't realized that. She said, "Oh, that's new." I mean, and I was like, "But where did you do performing arts?" And she's like, "For free, on street. You know, in festivals, or it just organically happens and everywhere." And that very much relates to carnival and all these intermittent things that lead up to carnival, which is where a lot of the people in the Caribbean is when they express their creativity in responding to political situations, right? Yeah.
刚才高导提到的嘉年华会，让我想到在之前那个台中歌剧院的副总监叶继平的副总监有跟我提到过，说其实两厅院是台湾一个比较大型的室内剧院，然后让大家比如说买票进场看表演艺术等等。当时觉得很意外，这是一个相对而言比较对台湾人比较晚近才出现这种室内剧院的场馆。那当时他就问副总监说，那到底之前大家都在哪里看这些表演艺术？说就在广场上啊，庙前在庙前面有野台戏啊，各种不同的情况，很多这些免费的户外的公开的活动跟表演艺术都在台湾的社会里面发生，就好像是在很多加勒比海国家一样，他们都是在嘉年华会这样的一个公开免费大型的群众活动当中的时候去表达跟发挥自己的创意跟艺术的技能。
Yeah, I think so. A lot of performing arts in the Caribbean comes from that. And I imagine performing arts maybe in Taiwan comes from that too, but I haven't learned enough about that. But that might be, you might know more about that, how that crossover between contemporary art and performance, stems that from the same here in Taiwan?
所以在很多时候，在加勒比海这些表演艺术，或者是很多当代艺术，都是源自于我们刚才看到那些公众公开的那些形式。所以好奇，比如说在台湾，它的发展的脉络或发展的方向，比如说当代艺术、表演艺术等等，也是有这样的方向发展出来的吗
？I'm not really familiar about the performance art, especially the performance arts on stage. But according to my acknowledgements, it's a transition point of the early 1990s. It's also the starting point of the Chinese contemporary art, which the performance art became one of the very important ways to express the artists' propaganda, or artists' manifest on politics and society, and they like to use very flexible and organic work to organizing the exhibition or the festivals. So that kind of a spirit is very same as what happens in Caribbean now.
我对台湾的这个表演艺术或者是的认知可能没有这么的深刻的了解，但是就我所知的话，台湾当代艺术是在90年代是一个非常重要的转捩点跟发生的起始点等等。当时也有很多的行为艺术因此产生。那当时在过程里面的时候，他们也同样的用这种非常台式的方式去举办各种不同的活动。我觉得在这方面而言的话，在台式的程度上，加勒比海跟台湾之间的确有很多可以对照的相似之处。
And when we talk about the similarities, I think the most interesting part is that the similarities of the environment as well, because of the environment. Yeah, that's when I traveled in Martinique. I just find out the agricultural landscape is almost the same as here. And I think that kind of a similarity is very important because when we talk about like organic, the flexibles, or the colonial history, or the agricultural economics, somehow I feel that we have the kind of the same language or same backgrounds that we can start together.
I even found that with indigenous art and crafts that I haven't encountered that much, but a little bit. And I immediately, it was like I was looking at it in the Caribbean, it was very similar. So it's even pre-colonial. And I was telling you already, like what I learned actually here in Taiwan last week was that because when the Dutch came here and they wanted to set up this agriculture, so people from Fujian and Guangdong, I hope I say it right, were shipped to Taiwan to do that. But in the Caribbean, I found what happened after the end of slavery was that all the Europeans then were like, well, we need workers. And then, like the Dutch were very content with what had happened here. And just decided to get contract workers from exactly the same two places and ship them to the Caribbean. So then you get those similarities, I think, because you keep shipping people back and forth all over the world.
刚才高森老师还提到，就是在比如说环境方面，台湾跟加勒比海某些地区也有很大的相似之处。比如之前到了马丁尼克的时候，这个地方的时候，看到当地的这个农业环境基本上跟台湾有很大的相似之处。那另外，所以在这种情况之下，这些弹性有机、殖民历史还有农业环境的相似之处，会让两边之间的对比上面会有更多有意思的层面可以切入。另外一点，Sasha在台湾所认识到另外一个所知道的另外一些事情是，比如说在台湾过去荷兰殖民的过程的时候，他们把中国的南部的福建、广东人带到台湾来帮他们务农。后来呢，到了19世纪或者18世纪后期的时候，到那个奴隶制度结束，在加勒比海结束之后呢，他们就想到之前福建、广东人这样可以务农，所以他们18、19世纪的时候也带了一批的中国人到当地去务农。所以当地的农业因此在某些程度而言也有中国传统农业的影子，所以这些因为人口流动的关系的时候，会造成在这边也许是地景或者地貌上面会有相似的地方。那另外，刚才还提到的另外一点是，他在台湾虽然接触到的原住民艺术还不是太多，可是他之前看到台湾的原住民艺术的时候，觉得就有很多，他觉得好像跟加勒比海的原住民艺术有很多的类似的地方，所以这些殖民前所出现的艺术跟工艺的作品，其实也可以拿来对照。
For example, last year I invited Curaçao artist, Izomatas, and he take a really long trip from Curaçao to here, which means first flight from Curaçao to Amsterdam, and then he take another flight from Amsterdam to here.
比如说，我去年邀请过另外一位来自加勒比海普拉索的艺术家来台湾，他为什么的话，他要在普拉索先飞到阿姆斯特丹，在阿姆斯特丹转机之后再来台湾，所以这个航程非常不易。
Yeah, but he is very satisfied and very happy about the residential project here because what he concentrates is about the organic and also the temperate buildings on the island because according to the economic conditions, the people on the island they usually use kind of very cheap material or temperate material to build their house, which is almost the same as here.
所以另外，不过当时的艺术家来台湾驻村之后，对于今天这样的当地，他所关注的这个主题跟焦点是关注这些那当地的民众，他们会使用这些当地的物材跟材料之后呢，去打造出这些暂时性的建筑。因为比如说在当地，比如说布拉索当地的他们可能就因为资源的关系或者是不同的因素之下，他们会选择用相对比较低廉的材料作为他们建筑房子的时候使用。
Yeah, when Tizos have kind of a field research here in Taipei, we feel Taipei is kind of a treasure for him because this, it's a kind of a huge database of we call it illegal building here, 违章别人。So it's got a lot of also insight for his work.
所以他在台湾所闲逛的，就看到台湾台北其实有很多的所谓违章建筑违章建物等等，那这些建筑对他来说就是非常有趣、值得观察跟收集的素材。
Yeah, no, it's because his practice really is about that, right? And all over the Caribbean, actually, you see these concrete buildings, but they're not finished. So, because people go bit by bit, you save little, and then you maybe buy the materials. So you put them on the piece of land where you intend to build, and then you save up again. So now you can ask somebody to start building the first floor. And you see those iron things that are actually seen here too, in Pietro Caribbean. Yeah, it's very, I think it's sort of like what we were talking about your exhibition, power and concrete. Like if you, if you're not that, if you grow economically, that you have to build fast and affordable, that it gives you a certain aesthetic, and that's very similar, I think. Yeah.
在加勒比海当地的民众，他们盖房子的时候，他们的情况，因为他们资源或者是储蓄或者是这些家里面的经费有限的关系，所以他们常常盖房子都是分阶段盖的，所以在当地有看到很多那种房子盖的时候盖的水泥，或者说骨架会停工一阵子，然后他们存够的钱就盖一楼，然后存够的钱就盖屋顶啊、做窗户等等，所以他们的房子常常就会那个半成品的状态。那这方面也跟比如说他们是大量使用水泥有关系，因为在经济发展快的时候，你需要用更快、更平价的方式来新建房子的时候，水泥常就是一个他们会使用的素材。但是使用水泥素材就会影响了很多建筑物或者是建筑环境的美感等等，这也是选择不同的素材之后所造成的后续影响。
那我抱歉，悄悄话了一下。然后我们想说，也许就是只有我们两个在对谈有点就是无聊，那我们想说在这边开放就是题目对，开放就是 Q&A 的时间。那如果有观众想要问问题的话，就欢迎发问。
So after the discussion, we open up for questions, comments, and feedback as well. Are there anyone in the audience who would like to ask something about artworks or anything about Caribbeans or interested as well?
Mr. Chen, 全真真翻译得非常好 ，a very good translator. So I speak in Chinese, so you can do very quickly the translation. 我的问题是说，你们在谈那个slavery 的问题就是说那个 about the slavery system， 有关于那个奴役制度的问题。但是在台湾呢，其实可能没有那么简单，就是说是有荷兰人带过汉人这个问题那么简单，因为还有这个后来汉人、清朝、明政跟清朝之后的统治，使得台湾的原住民，尤其是后来产生的平埔族，就是整个 assimilation 整个混融在一起，失去了自己的独特西国际来的体。这个问题在台湾现在是一个非常明确的问题。那我比较好奇说，在加勒比海是有没有类似的情况？所以当地的 indigenous， 当地的原住民，他后来的发展情况是如何？这是我过去去古巴访问的时候，觉得有兴趣想要跟你们充分了解的问题。 如果有需要我自己讲，我可以再补充一点，但是就请你来帮我翻译。
My question about slavery and the legacies in Taiwan and the Caribbean in Taiwan is very complicated because not just that the Dutch colonizers bring Han people from southern China to Taiwan. After that, there are Ming Dynasty, Qing Dynasty. Over the years, for example, indigenous people in Taiwan's common clans were assimilated into the majority of populations, and that also influenced how they identify themselves. And that, how do we recognize that the clan indigenous people is also a big topic here in Taiwan now. So I wonder how's the situation for indigenous people in the Caribbean? How was the situation they're facing now? Because I was in Cuba once, that's a topic I was really interested in knowing more. I didn't get opportunities to understand or dig deeper into the topics.
I think it's quite similar. I understood that indigenous people in Taiwan are about 3% now.
This is recognized.
Recognized, and there's also unrecognized ones, right? Yeah. And yeah, and it's pretty similar in the Caribbean that there is no islands who have a majority indigenous people, because a lot, they were just big, because when they were colonized, like first, the Europeans tried to have the indigenous work on the fields, and a lot of them passed away because of the circumstances. And also we brought all these alien diseases, and lots of people passed away because of that. So rapidly the population declined already. And then also after that, I think there was for years no real attention, similar to here in Taiwan, I understand. And it's only also in the Caribbean recently that people really are interested in, like, okay, who was here first? And it's mainly within the islands I went to. In Puerto Rico, there is the largest group of indigenous people that, like even scientifically is proven that they are really indigenous. And there is a lot of artists actually also working with artisans and trying to preserve certain techniques, and also other artists using those techniques and working with master artisans to then translate that more into modernity and use within contemporary art. But it's very recent also, so that is very similar here, what I understand. And now people, you also, like here also people say, oh, I am indigenous, where before they wouldn't acknowledge that at all. And that similar thing happens in the Caribbean. Like now it's a thing to be proud of, whereas before you didn't want to acknowledge it.
我觉得在这方面，台湾跟加勒比海之间的相似之处其实还蛮多的。一方面是刚才提到，台湾现在由政府所认定跟认可的原住民大概占3%左右，当然还有很多还在争取尚未获得官方认可的这些原住民族。那所以在加勒比海的情况也是如此，他们当时在殖民之初的时候，这些欧洲殖民者把这些原住民带进到了这些农地去做劳工，因为环境困苦的关系，很多人因此就不幸的就是丧命了。那另外一方面是外来者也带来很多外来的疫病，这些疫病也导致他们当地人口快速下滑。到了现在的时候，在加勒比海所有的地区呢，基本上原住民都不是占多数的人，都不是人口的多数。即便是比如说在波多黎各等等，他们在经过了科学去验证跟确认之后，他们有相当多的这个原住民的族群跟人口，但他们还是没有常常在社会里面长期受到忽视或者被重视等等。就好像台湾的时候也有遇到台湾女生跟我说，他们现在是强调自己是原住民的身份认同，然后可能过去并没有获得政府的认可等等，这些情况在加勒比海上发生，他们现在也是慢慢的在重拾他们对原住民的认同啊、注意跟重视，让大家越来越能够以原住民的身份为荣为傲，而不再会去遮遮掩掩或者是不愿意提起自己原住民的事情。 很多艺术家现在开始去努力跟当地原住民的工艺师或者艺术家合作之后，把这些传统的原住民的技术或技巧融入在当代艺术或者现代艺术当中，希望能够借此去凸显、彰显跟保存他们一部分的原住民的技术。
So along this exhibition, the museum is doing a podcast series, and one of the episodes in it will actually address this. And they bring together Taiwanese scholars with artists or scholars from the Caribbean. So I chose those, and it will be an artist, Natalia Huggins, from the Dominican Republic, who will talk about that. So that will be online later on. I think in the Caribbean, like European colonizers acted as if that region all of a sudden started in 1492 and didn't exist before, but of course it did. Like in Taiwan, there have been population on the islands for 6,000 years. So that is only now being acknowledged, and there's more awareness, it's not like the world started when we found it. Something was happening before Europeans found it.
在这次展览的期间当中，他们也会制作一些的 podcast 广播节目，其中就会有一期会邀请到来自于多米尼加的艺术家一起讨论我们刚才提到这些问题。那其实，在这些国家，不论台湾或者是加勒比海地区，他们都在讨论，比如说谁先来谁后到的问题。很多人他们都在，当然时间点不应该只是切在1492年欧洲人发现新大陆之后才出现的历史，在他们发现之前，其实当地都有很多的原住民在那边生活等等，所以我相信这个问题当然并不会只是断在欧洲开始殖民之前，在欧洲殖民之前就有很多的当地的民众在这边居住，像台湾一样，可能6、7年前就已经有原住民在这个岛上居住跟生活。
So, what do you think? Have you worked with indigenous artists also before and interested in those practices?
很好奇高森老师之前有跟原住民的艺术家合作过，他们的艺术实践是什么样的样态？
我可能这边比较不会想要用原住民的角度，而是从那个 Creole 就是克里奥文化的角度来看的话。其实台湾某方面也是具备了，就是跟加勒比海相近的这个克里奥文化，就是说，当然这个克里奥文化它也混杂了原本的原住民文化，还有后来每个时代再来到这个岛屿的移民者，那这些东西层叠在一起，它就很自然的在各种的文化面貌上面呈现出。一种就是非典型的，或者是非比较混合式的一个文化。那这个东西当然也是会对艺术的一个表现形式有所影响。
I think that we can talk about it from a Creole perspective. That Creole is like based on the indigenous architecture, art or artistic techniques, and also over the years, over the centuries, they have different fusions, different influence from colonial histories, from all different elements, and then put into different expressions or different practices. I think in that ways, yes, we are seeing that in Taiwan or the Caribbean, that's why they have so many different kind of expressions. They are unconventional, untypical, or not typical, or atypical, or hybrid.
And is there a lot of contemporary artists using the techniques or into translating older techniques into contemporary?
Kind of techniques, kind of indigenous.
Yeah. How Mafalia is going, or for instance, Jorge Gonzalez in Puerto Rico has like a very known practice right now to work with these master artisans like they do with Nidi now.
I think for the contemporary artists, especially the indigenous contemporary artists, at this moment in Taiwan, it's more like the periods that's relearning or restarting from the tradition because the colonial history and also the martial law periods, which cause the loss of the culture. So that's kind of the situation.
台湾的当代艺术家，也许是原住民当代艺术家，也许会因为是在这几年当中的时候，开始慢慢去回返，或者是重新去观察跟发掘这些传统的艺术工艺等等。因为毕竟在长时间的这个历史或者是戒严时期之下，有很多这些的技巧或者艺术工艺可能已经散佚了，所以需要花时间去慢慢把它找回来。
But I feel there's still kind of a gap between the art circle, which is more connected with the international art scenes, and would like to use more material like media arts or video arts. But even on this kind of material basis, artists they still interesting on investigating the historical context of the indigenous cultures on the island.
当他们在使用不同的年代、不同素材的时候，也会去追寻跟追溯这些，比如说美材或者这些物件文化背后的各种的历史的脉络跟意涵。
So any further questions from our audience? 有其他的问题吗？就是有观众想要再丢问题。
Don't be shy.
Or even a comment is good.
So I'm assuming people in the audience have seen the show, and I would really like to hear what your thoughts were, and if you indeed recognized something or.
在座的各位都看过展览了吗？还没看过的举手一下。I'm just checking if everyone's not haven't watched it. 如果还没看过的话，就是等一下有机会可以看一下。如果各位看过的话，好奇各位看完这次展览之后有什么样的感想或反应，或者是在各位在作品里面有没有看到，比如说似曾相识或者是熟悉的元素在里面。
Actually, I did some short preview of the exhibition, and I find the first one, the Puerto Rico artist, there's 4 screens on walls, and I feel really touched by a scene about Disneyland. He's talking about a Puerto Rican worker. They work at Disneyland as as an operator of the little birds. There's a trend going to the tuna with the song and some exotic dancer on it, and I feel like I'm thinking about that some influence of the modern tourism. It's like we can find a lot of exotic resorts in the Caribbean Sea countries, and it may push the economy, and also provide a working opportunities for the local workers, but it also maybe will give the tourists some incorrect expression of the local culture. And that's my comment on the art piece. And I want to know what's your comment or thoughts on the tourism in the Caribbean countries?
Very much in line with what you're saying. I think tourism makes that a lot of people outside the Caribbean just see it as a vacation paradise, basically, and everybody who lives there is basically tools to accommodate me in giving me a paradise experience. Whereas there's that very little interest in the population or the local culture or the daily life of people, other than that I really want you to bring you my cocktail very fast. And that's a very painful thing if you travel there without being a tourist. People are not being approached in an equal way, or and this is generalized. Of course, there's always people traveling different, but it's also how it is being expressed to me by people in the region. why have I not asked about universal issues and why are you not interested in how I look at things? And that is, that's kind of how that is felt. I think we need to read just, in my publication I also write like it's 33 countries. It's not like a space that is being designed for a stufication. It's different countries where people live, like people like you and me, that we should also, encounter as such. I also get irritated if people, if I say I'm from the Netherlands and all they know is that you can smoke joints there and there's prostitution. Then I actually understand that feeling where I'm like, well, hell, I'm more than, smoking a joint and sex.
当然，这一观众提到是在波多黎各这两位艺术家的作品当中，4篇大陆上里面提到了波多黎各的民众，他们到美国去之后，在迪士尼乐园里面找到工作，然后在面对那些观光客来这个小小世界，然后非常愉快的过日子。观光体验，但是想到在加勒比海地区的观光业，对于加勒比海当地民众而言，一方面是产生了很多工作机会，但是也可能造成很多的观光客到了当地之后会被误导或误解，或者对于当地文化有错误的认知等等。莎莎提到的是，的确观光业对他来说非常重要，可是很多人想到加勒比海，就会因此把它想成这是一个度假天堂。我到那边去之后呢，当地的居民就是要来服务我，然后让我有好像在天堂一样的度假体验，但实际上对当地民众而言的时候，他们被视为工具人的时候是非常痛苦的，他们是非常不舒服的，会觉得你们到了这边来之后，对我们的文化完全没有任何兴趣。唯一会问我的问题是问我说鸡尾酒什么时候来，所以这种情况之下，他们其实是非常不舒服的。那当地艺术家跟他说，他们都不会问我，比如说对于某些问题的看法、某些议题有什么样的观点等等，只问我这些观光客会问的事情。当然，这是以偏概全的说法，也有一些人到那边不是以观光客的角度来看待这一切。但是还是要提醒各位，加勒比海总共有33个国家，不能够一笔画去把它认为这就是一个观光区，它有很多不同的细微的差异跟面向值得去探讨跟研究。就像比如说，Sasha来自荷兰，一般人听到荷兰就想你们有红灯区你们可以合法吸大麻等等，他也会觉得我们不是只有大麻跟红灯区而已。所以这样的情况，我相信如果没有花时间去认识的话，常常会对于某一些国家或地区产生非常严重的刻板印象。
And he keeps remembering what I said. I keep on talking. I forget he needs to translate. He's so good. Thank you.
And I want to continue the same issues about the tourism because, in some parts of the world, like in Europe or Japan, the tourists will enter our museum and they're also interested about the local contemporary arts. But do you think is that any opportunity to find the balance between the tourism business and the art industries in Caribbean Sea, or it's very difficult, very different compared to the tourism from some other part of the world?
Yeah, I think tourists just, that's been really a discussion on all the islands I went. Like all the art professionals are trying to figure out how can you make tourists actually be interested in the contemporary art scenes on our islands. And to convince, for instance, governments to spend a little more resources on that to make that happen. But mostly it is either a museum that explains the history of the country, and art-wise it's also very geared up to, it's like souvenir, it's like decorative words, because everybody feels this is what the visiting tourists want. They want to buy a picture to take home or a painting to take home about a beautiful blue sea, or maybe the colorfulness. And so it's hard, like people try to find ways to break that, because of course it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you keep providing it, then that is what the tourism buy. But if you actually offer them something else, then maybe that is what they will consume then. Which I kind of hope for the latter. Like in Aruba, they are trying to set up some new museums, and I was really interested in the curator was trying to open a museum for Carnival, and really trying to use contemporary artists that use Carnival as an inspiration, but really make contemporary works, like Marlon Griffith, who is from Trinidad and lives in Japan. So that the artists, there was a big exhibition, travel exhibition called Amas, by Krista Thompson and Claire Cancun's. And they really showed, and there's a big publication with essays. I mean, if you're interested, it is in the book, you can look it up in the recommended reading. But it was a fantastic endeavor, I thought, to sort of show where Carnival could lead to within contemporary art. And I was really hoping that this Aruba museum would actually take works like this to actually present, and even their own population next to tourists, like surprised with what this can lead to, and it's still something very authentic to you, because Carnival is very important of Aruba as well. But yeah, and then there came a political change, and the project was stalled.
刚才老师问的问题是，现在我们比如说看到很多观光客或者是旅客，他们到了欧美地区或者是到日本的时候，会去美术馆，无论是走马看花也好，或者真的去看艺术品也好，但是美术馆会变成他们的一个观光行程之一。这种情况在加勒比海有没有可能出现，或者是在对于观光客也观光产业有没有可能把，比如说当地的当代艺术放进他们的观光行程当中？那其实这是加勒比海很多的岛屿上面的这些艺术工作者都在思考的问题，怎么样去吸引观光客对于当地的当代艺术会感兴趣，进而可能会去观赏、消费或者是接受它，这些都是他们在思考的问题。那这又回到另外一个鸡生蛋蛋生鸡的问题，就是观光客到了当地之后去购买这些，无论是纪念品也好，装饰性的工艺品也好，到底是因为这是观光客想要买的，所以我们做这些东西给他们买，还是我们做出他们只看到这些东西，所以只能买这些东西？所以这是一个很难去判断到底根源是如何的问题。但是也有一些却想要去改变这样的现状，比如说在加勒比海地阿鲁巴这个地区，他们现在有一群艺术家之前想要去做一个跟嘉年华有关的美术馆。那这个嘉年华有关的美术馆是里面去邀请很多的当代艺术家，他们以嘉年华为灵感去发展出新的当代艺术作品。那之前有一个大型的群展，也曾经有相关的专刊都在介绍，比如说从嘉年华为出发点之后，可以开发出什么样新的不一样的当代艺术作品。在Sasha的电子书里面也有那个推荐书单里面也有这本书，大家可以去参考一下。那就让大家看到，其实即便是从对他们而言非常熟悉、非常日常的嘉年华这个元素，还可以衍生出他们觉得意想不到的艺术作品，但同时之间，对于当地民众观光客而言，还是可以产生不同的共鸣。
So it's actually when I was doing the research, talking to a lot of people, like Cuba is actually a good example that actually from when Castro came and he decided to put the arts really on the foreground and make this whole educational system, and everybody knows Cuban arts. The museums, etc., really show great works also. I mean, of course, not the economic challenge now, but it's so ingrained in the DNA, and what I was explaining about the population. I mean, the whole international art scene flies every 2 years or 3 years to the Havana Biennale. We are really paying attention. So I was saying, that if you take that as an example, that actually if you are taking it seriously and you do invest in it, both the scene and the political, governmental institutions to invest in it, I do think it can actually get the attention from audiences and from tourists as well. Whereas if you don't do it, Now you are complaining that you are being looked at as something exotic, but that is actually what you offer them to yourself too. So you're, like sort of confirming how people look at you, where you're actually against that's how you want to be looked at. But then you have to present yourself differently, I think. And I think Taiwan is another example. I mean, there's great contemporary art here. You do invest in it, people are. And people will come to the museums, no? Or not? Am I saying that wrong?
后来呢，提到这个阿鲁巴的加勒比海地美术馆的这个计划呢，但是因为当地的政府的这个局势变化之后，就因此倒退了。可是如果各位去拿古巴为案例做对比的话，古巴当时政府就投了很多资源在教育或者是艺术当中的时候，进而让大家，比如说刚才提到，大家都有习惯就是到美术馆或者去看这些作品的这个习惯或文化，然后在美术馆里面的确呈现出了很多精彩的作品等等，所以很多加勒比海的艺术家也希望能够透过这种方式去争取更多的资源投入在艺术跟文化当中。那现在比如说在哈瓦那双年有非常成功的活动，每2年的时候就有很多人从世界各地到古巴去欣赏这个双年展。台湾的话，我相信台湾政府因为投入了不少的资源在艺术文化教育方面之后呢，也许会有相当的注意之后，帮助当地的民众或者是观光客或旅客到了台湾来之后，也愿意到美术馆来走走。
So we open for the last question. 要我麻烦的帮我翻一下，就是作为一个艺术工作者，其实你很难避免会在展览中去碰到不同的议题。那我自己在做艺术活动的时候，也会去思考说我跟原住民议题或是移工的关系。然后像你在策展论述里面有提到，作为一个荷兰籍的策展人，在做加勒比海地区的这个展览的时候，没办法回避这个殖民的问题嘛。但就是这个关系可能在过去跟现在的关系其实已经不太一样，而且你在办这样的展览的时候，实际上也是为了他们在发声，也是提供他们一个跟不同地区连接的机会，然后我们也可以看到我们跟加勒比海的关系。但我其实蛮好奇，就是你自己在过去做这个加勒比海地区的艺术研究的时候，跟你在这次做这个展览，你是怎么看待你跟自己做一个荷兰籍策展跟加勒比海以及跟艺术家之间的关系？
So my question is about your relationship as a Dutch curators and your relationship with the Caribbeans and Caribbean artists. Because in Taiwan, as art workers, we also touch on different issues, for example, indigenous people issues, and also our relationship with migrant workers in Taiwan as an issue as well. In your statement, you also mentioned that as the Dutch curators, colonialism or the legacy is something that we cannot avoid. But of course, that nowadays, the relationship between former colonizers and the former colonies maybe have been changing. And your exhibition is also the opportunity for them for us to understand or access or connect with Caribbean artists or the artworks. That's a way for them to speak out and reach out to our work as well. So my question to you is, how do you think about your relationship as a Dutch curators and the Caribbean artists?
That's an interesting question because originally artists, the museum tried very hard to get funding to get the artists from the Caribbean over. And I was really excited about that because it's, I was talking to Nobuo about that as well. It's kind of weird that I am as the former or still colonizer of some of the islands fly happily over to Taiwan with all the access that I have. And in the end, none of the artists is here. And that's actually pretty painful. And I struggled with it a little bit too, because till the end, like I think till a week ago, we were really trying hard to get, I mean, some of them had other obligations, but to get like either Nadia or maybe Maksaens over here. And it just didn't work out. It became too complicated because I could only fly Maksaens out once a week from the Caribbean, and then the connection with Taipei, and it was $5,000. And it became such an message to me, was such a confrontation with the privilege of I have today still, that, you know, I mean, I just fly directly to here, and I just can't get them over here. And it's about them. I actually wanted to make a connection between them and you, and I end up being the one getting the connections once again. So I do find that problematic, but you know, like even the artists themselves were like, well, at least their work is here, you know, so they are still happy about that. But I'm really trying to grasp, that's why I was also happy to meet with Nabuo and have this conversation with him, who has already some connections, to see how can I actually make that happen without my wide ass, to say something improper, being always present in the conversation. And it is problematic. I really hope somehow that will become easier. But for Maksaens too, we had to apply for a visa, it cost a lot of money, we hardly got it because then we were trying for one country, but then the flight went to another, and if you don't get a Schengen visa, you cannot fly to that other country. We couldn't fly him out to the States because he hadn't the visa, and even if you stay on the airport and you transfer, he was not allowed into that. And I'm so against this difference. I don't understand why nobody asks me questions or question my presence, but they do about other people. I mean, what did I do other than being born in Holland that makes me apparently a better person or a more valuable person? That doesn't make any sense. I'm no more valuable than any of the people I met there or any of the people here. Well, you guys are privileged too, you can fly too, no?
的确，这是一个很明显我们会遇到的问题。那我当然这次其实非常希望，我们其实在开展前的1个礼拜都还在努力，希望能够把部分的艺术家到台湾来。但是因为无论是签证的问题、转机的问题、机票的问题、价钱的问题等等，机票价钱的问题也是非常大的障碍。到最后很可惜，这次没有机会让这些艺术家有机会能够到台湾。比如说我们那个海地艺术家要从台湾飞到从海地飞到台湾的时候，那个班机可能从海地飞过去的另外那个中转的国家1个礼拜就1班，然后到过去那边的时候还要去申请转机签证，然后这个过来的飞机的来回的机票可能是5000美金等，这些都造成了他们到最后没有机会亲自来台湾。我们当然希望这次通过这个展览之后，是建立这些艺术家艺术作品到跟台湾的观众之间的关系。他们到最后还是觉得说啊，至少我们的作品到了台湾，有机会在台湾展出。但是我当然还是希望有机会，可以不需要经过白人的中介或欧洲人的中介之后，直接让台湾跟加勒比海之间产生关联性。那这是我们遇到的无法避免这个非常现实的问题，就是为什么有些国家，比如说我只是因为出生在荷兰，我就可以在台湾享有免签的待遇。或者是我来台湾的时候，这个海关不会问我任何的问题，不会有人质疑我来台湾的动机是什么等等。但这些艺术家其实对我来说，对于这次展览来说，它的价值是相同的，他们也同样的重要。可是他们就因为不同的因素之后没有办法来台湾。我觉得这是一个我们势必会面对问题，也希望有朝一日有机会，也可以让这个障碍变得比较简单跨越，或比较容易跨越。我们很高兴有机会可以跟高森老师之间有互相的沟通讨论，因为他毕竟跟过去之间跟加勒比海也产生不同的连接跟关系。那也希望在未来的情况之下的时候，我们有更多的可能性可以让这些艺术家不只是作品，还有本人也可以从太平洋的另外一边飞到台湾的。
Okay, so it seems already it's which好，那谢谢各位就是观众，就是花费你们非常宝贵的一个下午来参与我们今天的一个论坛。那也鼓励大家就是在论坛结束之后，可以花一些时间在这个非常精彩的展览里面，跟这些作品有更多的一个相处。那在结束之后，如果对我们2位的讲者有任何兴趣想要再继续讨论的话，也欢迎就是可以留下来跟我们一起讨论。 Okay, so thanks for everybody. That's you really spend a very valuable external to be with us for these forums, and we also encouraging that you can spend sometimes to see more about this institution and also the works. Okay, so thanks.